Okay, good morning. We're picking back up on a continuation of the testimony we had the other day about SNAP benefits, about food insecurity, and Carrie was from the Vermont Food Bank was very gracious because she's in the building a lot, doesn't happen to be today, but to reschedule her time with the committee so that we could talk with the folks with lived experience because they probably weren't going to have as equal or as easy an opportunity to get back here. So thank you so much for being so flexible, Carrie, and welcome virtually to the House Human Services Committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate that you all prioritized the presence of our neighbors and our partners. A lot of them came from really far away last week, and the weather was totally a consideration. It seems to be a Thursday thing. I'm actually stuck at my house today because I lost both my roads in the floods in the summer, and we don't get plowed out very easily because they aren't done repairing the roads. And so I'm zooming in today, which I am so glad this is an option. Lori, am I able to share my screen? Yes. Okay, great. I'll do that in just a second, but I want to introduce myself. I think I know everyone who's here today, but I'm Carrie Saylor. I am the Senior Manager of Government and Public Affairs at the Vermont Food Bank, and many of you do see me in the State House regularly. And I am zooming in today from Linden. And I'm really here to sort of reiterate what we talked about during Three Squares Day and just give you a little bit more background data and context, because I know this is a committee that likes to make data-driven decisions. And we have a really good study from Dr. Meredith Niles at UVM that just came out in January. So I'm going to share a little bit of that data with you with the time I have today. Let me pop up my slideshow. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Great, super. So the mission of the Vermont Food Bank, which I know many of you already know, a lot of you are involved in food security work in your lives back home, so this will be a repeat for you, but bear with me. Our mission is to gather and share quality food and nurture partnerships so that no one in Vermont will go hungry. And we are the only statewide food bank in Vermont. We are an organization that is 3 large warehouse distribution centers big. Those distribution centers are located in Barre, Brattleboro, and Rutland. And they serve all 14 counties and community organizations in those 14 counties. Those community organizations can be food shelves, they can be meal sites. We work with schools, we work with hospitals, we work with the SASH program, we work with a whole variety of partners. So I just want to underscore that nurture partnerships piece, because that's really how we get our work done. That's also how, we came last week to Three Squares Vermont Day, because Three Squares Vermont is one of those pieces of the puzzle that really requires key partnerships around the state. And I want to make sure that that's a part of this understanding, is that Three Squares is a statewide program for eligible individuals. The food bank also offers programs to people who are both eligible for Three Squares and who are not eligible for Three Squares. Just a brief overview of our scale. So we serve an average of 72,000 people a month around the state. That number comes from sort of a complicated rough calculation that we do. We actually try not to ask a lot of data from individuals because we want people to feel comfortable coming to our distribution events. In fact, our most popular distribution event is our Veggie Van Go. And that is a drive-through event where the only thing we ask is how many households people are picking up for. Last year, we distributed about 14.5 million pounds of food. This year, we're on track for about 15 million. In my opinion, that number is moving in the wrong direction. We would like to be distributing less food around the state of Vermont. We're fortunate enough to work with 299 farms. That number fluctuates, but it's usually around 300 farms a year. That's in part due to the support of the legislature and last year's appropriation, which allowed us to operate the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program at a scale that could help this many farms participate in the food system through the food banks network. And then our network really is these 215, 220 partners around the state. That is the lower number. You'll also sometimes see or hear me say 300 community partners, and that includes those schools, hospitals, SASH sites. Those folks are not the same. It's not the same kind of agreement with those folks. These network partners in this 215, 220 bucket are the folks who sign an MOU with us. They are primarily meal sites and food shelves or pantries. Just a little bit about where the food comes from. We are the designated agency to operate 2 federal food programs on behalf of the state of Vermont. One of those is the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. That's for older adults who are over 60 and are income eligible, so who make 130% of the federal poverty level or lower. I was admiring the chart on your wall behind Chair Wood the other day. And then TFAP is what we call it, but it's also officially referred to as the Emergency Food Assistance Program. And that is a commodity food program through the USDA that allows us to access USDA food, which is food that's purchased and produced in the United States, comes through food banks to a network of about 70 to 80 partners at any given time. That program is not something that every single one of our partners participates in because it has some administrative requirements that the federal government puts on that program that makes it difficult for all of our partners to participate in, and is really like a fixed amount of food. So those are great programs, but they do have limitations because they're federal. The other channel of food is donated food. So we get donated food from our grocery partners, from corporate, big corporate organizations through our partnership with Feeding America, or individual donations from like names like Cabot. And then from gleaning on local farms, which is harvesting the excess produce on those farms. And then the third place, which is the biggest area of growth for the food bank, is through purchased food. And we purchase staple foods through Feeding America, who's our national partner. They can get really good bulk rates for food, and we buy by the pallet load from them. Same with food vendors. We go out and shop in the market and buy pallets of food. And then Vermont farm and food producers, which is what I was mentioning earlier with the 300 farmers we work with. And then all that food goes out through this whole variety of networks and organizations, a few of which I named earlier, our network partners, those Veggie Van Go events in schools and hospitals. We work with SASH sites to deliver food directly to those folks receiving services at home so that they can, it's a fresh produce distribution, so they can access fresh produce. And our SASH coordinators distribute that food to those individuals in those programs. We operate a variety of backpack programs for kids and are really trying to transition this backpack program to a more robust youth food access program. We've done a few pilots with food pantries at schools and some elements. So this one is kind of a work in progress. And then CSFP gets directly distributed all over the state. And so sometimes that is our truck directly distributing, and sometimes that's with our partners. I sort of covered this a little bit. We also have a group of SNAP application assisters, and you met some of those folks last week. And some of our network partners are SNAP application assisters. And so they're directly working with individuals to help them sign up for 3 Squares Vermont. I'm sorry, can you hang on just one second? Sorry about that. When you're at home, there's animals. There's a lot of animals.
It's all right.
Like cats and dogs. So we have a team of 3 SNAP application assisters, and they help individuals all over the state. We're the only statewide organization doing that, and really what that allows for, we have a text line, an email line, and a phone line that people call in, and we really fill in some gaps in areas that don't have direct coverage. And this is something I probably don't need to show your committee, but it helps with some other committees. CSFP is that first column. That's the 130% of the federal poverty level eligibility, and then the amounts people can make per month or year. The second is the Three Squares Vermont eligibility level, which is that 185%. And then TFAP, we actually were able to set this to the ceiling of the program during COVID. And so we did that because we wanted to make sure that, remember all those lines of cars down the airport runways and around the corners of schools. We wanted to make sure that everybody who was in those lines was able to access the food that was available through those federal programs, and those were associated with TFAP. So that ceiling really makes it as accessible as possible for people to receive that very steady and available source of food.
Carrie,
Yeah.
On the CSFP, which is targeted to older Vermonters, could you give us a little bit more detail about how that program runs? Do you connect with senior centers? Does it go out through the AAAs? How is that done?
Yeah, so people actually have to register. They go through an application process, and we do outreach through senior centers. We do outreach through our SNAP outreach team does outreach. We do outreach with the AAAs. So when someone calls the AAA hotline, they can screen people for whether they're eligible, and then they can apply through Vermont Food Bank. That program has some interesting federal limitations on it. Right now, about 15 to 1,700 people receive those food boxes each month. That eligibility level is capped. I think we're allowed to have about 1,600 people total throughout the year. And, some people pick up their box every month. Some people aren't able to get there every month because of transportation issues or, whatever that looks like. So that number is a little variable, but we really do work to try and keep that participation number as high as possible and make sure that we're continually enrolling new people, because if that number drops, then our statewide number will get lower from, the federal government sets that number and looks at our averages. So we work really hard to keep that number as high as possible to make sure that this can be a resource for folks who need it when they need it.
Representative Garofano.
Thanks, Carrie. Particularly on that program, is there any flexibility in what's in the box? Because I've heard from constituents that what they're getting is not what they want to eat. So it doesn't really make sense for them to have that, go through the process of trying to pick it up or have it dropped off, or what culturally, appropriate food for different families or different individuals.
So that's a great question. And this is one of the more inflexible programs. There is a set list that we are able to order from that we get from the USDA. It is not a big list, sometimes it's fairly basic, right? So there are some canned foods, canned vegetables, canned fruits. There are some staples like pasta and rice and cereal. And it is not a lot of choice, and individuals do not get that choice. We choose and order, and then our volunteers pack those boxes every month and distribute those in partnership with a lot of our senior center and agency partners who are doing senior meals. I have heard this feedback too, and I wish that there was more flexibility and that there was a way to have a program that really met people's dietary needs and cultural preferences in a better way. This is not really the program that can do that. That's something that a lot of our network partner food shelves and food pantries are much more focused on, and that we as an organization have diversified what we're able to purchase in the open market to address some of those needs, including we now have a contract with an African eggplant grower in Chittenden County, so that every fall that food's available for some of our folks in that region who prefer that particular kind of vegetable that's not usually available in the stores, right? So we're trying to address that through other means, but unfortunately CSFP is not an easy program to adjust for.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions while I'm here?
Not right now.
Okay, great. You're all very tiny to me, so it's hard to see.
Well, there are more of us in the room now, so.
Oh, good. Welcome. So, I was sort of just saying a little bit about this. Donated food comes from a variety of sources, and again, is not something that is flexible to us. We receive what is available in excess in the food system in Vermont and redistribute that food. The USDA food is very much set what's available from those programs. We do sometimes have some choices, particularly in TFAP, like we can choose chicken legs or peanut butter, right? For protein sources, but it isn't the same wide variety that we can do from purchased food. And purchased food really is the area of growth that we're seeing. So in 2018, we're purchasing about 13.81% of the food we distribute. Now it's about 25%, which is a pretty big increase. Some of that is thanks to the legislature's support because it costs more money to buy food than it does for us to reclaim or redistribute food. And here it is as a percent. Here's the Vermont grown food as a percent of purchased food. And most of this is produce, although some of this is protein like eggs and dairy and meat.
We have a question here, Carrie. Rep Donohue.
Thank you. Yes, going back, well, just in terms of the sources of food and the purchased food, is it just with the purchased food category? I'm guessing that the local food banks need to pay to buy them from the Vermont Food Bank, or is it for any items?
There are a few ways that works. So primarily, any donated food is made available to our network partners for no cost. So if we receive a large donation or a large food drive, we put that on our shopping list for free for our partners. Any food purchased with state dollars, so this year that would be food purchased through the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program, is made available to our network for no cost. Any food that we purchase is sort of in that open market setting where we're purchasing staple foods. It is available to our network partners, but it is essentially at a lower cost, or, the goal is that it's at a lower cost than they could purchase it elsewhere because we are purchasing larger quantities and passing those discounts on. The exception to that is produce. So we make all of the produce that we purchase available for free to our network. And then those 70 to 80 agencies that participate in TFAP, all of that food goes to them at no cost, that federal food. So it kind of varies a little bit by source. Does that help clarify that? It's a little complicated.
It does, just for understanding the Vermont Food Bank budget and costs. So the only part where it's only the produce, the non-produce purchased items that you basically get back it doesn't become a part of your budget need because that gets reimbursed by the local food shelves purchases.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then I'll just kind of move on. I know you heard a lot.
Did you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
One quick clarifying question on the previous slide is that percentage amount, is that the percent of the total purchasing budget or percent of like total food as in like pounds? Probably percentage of the budget.
I would have to go back and look at my chart. I was thinking that it was pounds, but it may be dollars. Yeah, I'll check on that one for you. I made this slide a little while ago and I can't quite recall.
And then a quick follow-up on this specific chart. So it's great to see the steady uptick there. And I'm curious how you foresee 2025 and the future looking. And what are the factors that could either cause that to increase or decrease? I know we have a bill pending in relationship to this specific issue, but what would it take from us to continue to get that chart to move in the up direction?
Yeah, so right now, the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program is spending about 2.3 to 2.4 million dollars a year purchasing Vermont produce. That's our most expensive source of food, full stop. And we do that because we recognize that farm stability is a huge part of Vermont food security, which is really why we created this program back in 2018. Right now, we're in fiscal year 2025. We intend to spend that 2.3 to 2.4 million dollars, and our fiscal year ends on September 30th. We work on the federal fiscal year. So I would say until then, steady as the ship goes. However, for FY26, if we don't receive the support that we're looking for from the legislature, which is an overall package of $5 million with a little bit of a breakdown, which I'll explain in a moment, we're looking at a significant cut to this program of, maybe 800,000 to $1 million. So that would be less Vermont food purchased because we will have less money with which to purchase food, and we'll have to make some choices around efficiency of how to use those dollars to maintain the quantity that we need. Really, most of our partners are seeing more utilization of their food shelf resources. And there are lots of pressures. I know this committee has talked a lot about housing and homelessness. Fresh raw produce is not the most useful resource for people who are unhoused, who are living in a tent or living in a hotel. It is more expensive to purchase pre-prepared meals for those populations that they can cook in a microwave. We don't have great, really low cost sources of that kind of food. And so, it will really depend on how things shake out. There is the opportunity for state dollars to continue to support this program. And that's in large part to the bill that you introduced, Rep. Cole. And that's our hope, is that this would be able to continue and that we would be able to continue the support to farmers.
I really appreciate that answer. And I think one thing maybe to highlight, maybe for the committee as well, is just knowing that the first thing to go when a cut needs to be made, because we have less funding, is going to be the local stuff. So I think that's,
maybe.
well, yeah, when it comes to cost efficiency and needing to meet still the quantity needs of your program. So I think that's just an important piece to consider and how it circles back into our local economy.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Any other questions while we're still here?
We're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm not going to share, I'll just share the slide. It's in your slide deck that you have. You heard from a lot of our neighbors last week about the critical importance of how all these programs fit together. And then I do want to just quickly move into this section about food security in Vermont, because I want to touch on this new data from from Dr. Meredith Niles. Everybody has a title. So Dr. Niles and her team at UVM worked with folks from the University of Maine. This is a combined study with Maine and Vermont, but when she presented to House Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry, she really said the two states are very similar and we didn't see significant differences between the experiences of people in Maine and people in Vermont. So the data that is showing is combined. And the title of this study is called Experiences and Ongoing Challenges of Food Insecure Households in Vermont and Maine. And this is my non-researcher translation of this. So I'm going to do my best, but I did include a link to this in the testimony that I shared with Lori. And you can go look at the study yourself, which I think is probably a much better step, but I'm gonna do my best to highlight a few things. They took a group of people who they surveyed, and they asked them these 6 standard questions that the USDA uses to identify people who are food secure and people who are food insecure. And they broke this study group into these 2 groups, people who are food secure and food insecure, and then compared their experiences through their answers to these questions. A few of the key findings that I just want to point out for you, this is sort of their overall findings, but number 2 is that food insecure households had up to 8 times greater prevalence of adverse financial events during and since the financial shock of the COVID-19 pandemic as compared to food secure households. So these food insecure folks are experiencing financial interruptions in their life more frequently. Number 3, on average, food insecure households experienced 3 adverse financial events over the past 4 years, compared to just 1 in financially secure households. More than 4 in 1 financially insecure households then missed utility payments, had new credit card debt, only paid their credit card minimums, were unable to pay medical bills, on and on. And then finally, these findings suggest that food insecure households faced greater financial shocks in the last few years, which affected their ability to acquire food, their food security, their health in complex and interconnected ways. And one of the things that we have often said as the food bank is that food insecurity is actually financial insecurity. Everybody wants to go to the grocery store and just buy the food they need and want, and that requires dollars. And that is the main difference between people who are food insecure and food secure. And then this chart really shows that very clearly. You can see this top line, reasons that people were food insecure. They lacked money. People who are food secure, only 8% of them thought they lacked money, but people who are food insecure, 78.4% of them lacked money. And really, it couldn't be more clear. People don't have enough money to buy the food they need and want. Oh, sorry, this one got a little messy. This is just talking a little bit more about, the experiences of food insecure households. So missing payments, defaulting on loans, really those financial challenges that came along with the experiences of households who are food insecure. And I just want to point out something that we have also noticed, which relates to this ongoing, financial and economic disruptions, are the flood and disaster disruptions that we keep seeing. It can be very expensive for households to go through a disaster and to wait for the reimbursement that may or may not come from FEMA, because only some of us are eligible. So we have seen a spike in people utilizing food shelf and food pantry and Veggie Van Go resources in the months after flooding. And what we have also seen is that amount of people coming to those resources remains high for a long time, which is why we're projecting 15 million pounds of food being distributed this year. And I would like to remind you that you, as part of the state of Vermont, can make policy choices to ensure food security for everyone who lives here. And I have a few suggestions about how you could do that. One of those is to help fund us at the Vermont Food Bank to continue to do this work. We're requesting $5 million. 1.75 million of that is in base funding for responsive readiness. That would mean that we're able to respond in an urgent and ongoing way to many of these disasters that we have seen over the past 4 or 5 years. 3.25 million of that would be for food purchase and distribution, and to support our network's capacity to continue to serve more and more people. I cannot underscore the amazing work that the folks in our network are doing every single day to make sure that their neighbors are fed. And we really need to be able to support them to get their needs met organizationally, to have the capacity, refrigeration, shelving, the ability to pay staff to support the volunteers that are helping them each day. And then I just explained most of those. The other requests in front of you that we also talked about on 3 Squares Day are to strengthen Vermont farms by supporting $500,000 in base funding for crop cash and farm share. That really, it works hand in hand with 3 Squares. This is specifically for people who receive 3 Squares Vermont.
We have a question for you, Carrie. Rep Donahue.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering, it's maybe it's not even under your purview, but the issue of improving the ability to do outreach to get people onto 3 Squares, knowing that 50% of people who are eligible aren't on it, and that's, at least for now, federally financed and could really help offset some of the degree of needs. Are there any initiative or thoughts on how we can get more people who are eligible enrolled?
It's really a decentralized system, Representative Donahue. We as an organization advertise for people, to call us We did a campaign last summer that had a great response, but it is an arduous process for people to apply for Three Squares. And so even when they get to us and they have a person who's there to like really walk them through that process, folks often find out that they're just close to being ineligible, or that they, or that there's a lot of complicated paperwork that they have to collect in order to be able to fulfill the application. And it takes a long time and they become discouraged. I think honestly, the onus is on DCF. That's an Economic Services Division program. And in some ways we rely on them to be the ones to sort of help do that outreach. They're doing, some of it. They have stuff available on their website. But it is not as widely utilized, I think, as all of us would like to see. And I don't know that it's a simple like marketing problem. I think it's a combination. And I also think there are a lot of people who don't see themselves as the kind of people who would need that kind of help, but in fact may qualify and find it to be a helpful resource. There's still so much stigma around that program, even though it is such a critical and useful and wonderful program.
And that older Vermonters don't realize that it's not food stamps in the way that they think about food
Right.
stamps.
Yes.
It's actually a cash benefit. And I think that we can do a better job in our older Vermonters service system and helping people understand that. But having just tried to assist an individual who's 92 to go through the process, it is a onerous process to all the information that you have to give up about your life. It seems really, anyways, I don't preach into the choir about that, but yeah. Are you really going to the right
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what is available, and that if we were able to get people more connected with that, there would be less demand, hopefully, for what you were talking about here. And so, so where do we put our efforts? Do we put our efforts on maximizing the information campaign for, certain groups that we know are underrepresented in the eligible population of the federal benefit? Or do we, give the Vermont Food Bank the money, or the Meals on Wheels the money, or, because honestly, we can't do it all. Go ahead, Rep.
Yeah,
Giovanna.
thank you. I was just wondering, I recently became aware of an organization that kind of helps states remove the systemic barriers in accessing benefits. And I've had one meeting with them, but I'm curious if you're familiar with Code for America is their name.
Yes. Yep. I'm definitely familiar with Code for America. And I know that in the past they had reached out to offer support to the state of Vermont as they were going through their new system transition that they've been working on for quite some time. I believe at the time the state was either unable or not interested in support from them. I don't know where that's gone, but Hunger Free Vermont is the organization that really tracks that that system piece, and I think would love to be able to connect with
I
Code
actually
for
connected
America.
with Hunger Free Vermont and them, but I didn't know how you sat in that. But yes, I'll continue following up with DCF on that.
That's great news. Yeah, I've heard of them, and they've helped other states really work out some of that technology tangle. And I just want to go back and name a little bit of what you were saying, Representative or Chair Wood, about the sort of comparative challenge. And I think one of the reasons that we brought all of the organizations together that we did on Three Squares Day, Hunger Free to talk about restaurant meals, NOFA to talk about crop cash, the V4As to talk about the support for Meals on Wheels, is because all these pieces work together. And I think from the food bank's perspective, an investment in us is what needs to happen now in the immediate moment to give the legislature and the administration time to work on those bigger, stickier issues. The bigger, stickier issues like minimum benefits for Three Squares, like the Three Squares application process, like making sure we have a database that really works for both the folks who are helping people fill out applications and the people who are filling them out, right? Like these are longer term projects. It's why we wrote the food security roadmap to 2035. Lots and lots of these pieces are in that document. And a lot of them take a little more time than a year or two. But really, what the food bank is seeing is people now who need food. And I don't actually see it as an either or. I see it as a scaled investment. The more that, the more that you figure out those sticky situations and the less that you need us, the less we're going to come and ask you for funding. It really is. I don't think it's necessarily like an us or them. I think it's like, how do we want to make sure that this system is really serving people's needs when and where they're at?
Right. That seems like a appropriate wrap up. Thank you so much for answering our questions and for being there for Vermonters and for those organizations that are also trying to support Vermonters through some, difficult times, that people are facing, and the inflation has particularly hit hard in food. And
Yeah.
so I think that's something that, we can see in your data in terms of the amount of pounds of food that's been distributed is, you can see a direct correlation to, as inflation started to hit us, and combined with coming out of COVID and the financial impacts that had for people on long-term basis as well. So thank you for all that the food bank is doing, and we appreciate you, and we will work with our counterparts across the hall. I think they're going to take the lead on the food bank's request. But we'll be there to support their efforts as well.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for the hard work that you're doing and the support you've given us in the past. This is really a partnership, and we're very grateful to have all of you doing this work with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. And I hope you will be prepared for the foot of snow that we're supposed to get this weekend. You might have a hard time getting out on Monday.
We're hoping that the tractor will be fixed by then.
Yeah,
We're gonna
that's
cross
good.
our fingers.
All righty, take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.